The nerve storm device hummed with the sort of malevolent energy that suggested its creators had particularly unpleasant childhoods. Instructor Vexka regarded the chrome-plated monstrosity with the same fond expression a grandmother might reserve for a favorite grandchild, assuming said grandmother enjoyed watching things scream until their vocal cords snapped. "Observe the neural interface crown," Vexka announced to the assembled cadets, his chitinous fingers dancing across the control panel with practiced ease. 17 fiber optic conduits, each calibrated to specific pain receptors. The Tarathi developed this beauty after their third civil war, when they realized conventional interrogation was insufficiently creative. The classroom fell silent, except for the occasional nervous click from the Zelani cadets' mandibles. Elite students from 12 species had gathered for Advanced Psychological Warfare, a course title that managed to sound both academic and vaguely threatening. The humans naturally had insisted on attending despite multiple warnings about the curriculum's unsuitability for emerging civilizations. "The nerve storm bypasses your body's natural pain regulation," Vexka continued, clearly enjoying himself. "It convinces your nervous system that you're being simultaneously flayed, burned, and dissolved in acid while remaining perfectly conscious. The longest any being has endured full activation is 27 seconds. A Krillian battle monk managed that feat before surrendering state secrets and begging for death." Cadet Morrison raised his hand. The human looked disturbingly relaxed for someone receiving a lecture on advanced torture techniques. "Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story." "Yes, the exchange student from Sol 3 has a question?" Vexka's tone suggested he was already regretting this interaction. "Sir, when you say full activation, does that mean there are partial settings?" "Indeed. We typically demonstrate at 15% capacity to avoid permanent psychological damage." "And the Krillian lasted 27 seconds at full power?" "Correct. The warrior caste of Krillia are genetically modified for pain tolerance, yet even they—" "Could I try it?" The question hung in the recycled air like a particularly awkward dinner guest. Several cadets turned to stare at Morrison with expressions ranging from admiration to genuine concern for his mental health. Vexka's compound eyes shifted through several colors before settling on confused amber. "I beg your pardon?" "The device, sir. For educational purposes. I'd like to experience what we're studying." "Absolutely not." The instructor's voice carried the finality of a star-going supernova. "The demonstration model runs at 15% precisely because full activation would leave you a drooling, broken shell of your former self. Humans are a recently spacefaring species. Your pain tolerance is laughably primitive compared to established civilizations." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "Right. But wouldn't first-hand experience provide better insight into the psychological warfare applications? I mean, how can I effectively deploy something I don't understand?" A Tefran cadet named Crix Val leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting the classroom lights. "The human makes a valid point, instructor. Theoretical knowledge lacks practical context." "The human," Vexka replied through gritted fangs, "will experience theoretical knowledge because practical knowledge will require his immediate transfer to the psychiatric ward." "With respect, sir," Morrison continued, "aren't we supposed to be preparing for real combat scenarios? If an enemy captures me and uses this device, shouldn't I know what to expect?" The logic was sound, which made it infinitely more irritating. Vexka had been teaching this course for 47 standard years, and in all that time, no student had ever volunteered for the practical demonstration. Most species possessed enough survival instinct to recognize clearly labeled death machines. Morrison, your concern for academic thoroughness is noted. However, I will not be responsible for turning your brain into decorative pudding. What if we start at 15% and work up gradually? The 15% setting has reduced grown Keth warriors to sobbing children. Right, but I'm not Keth. This was becoming circular in the most aggravating way possible. Vexka glanced around the classroom, hoping for support from the other cadets. Instead, he found expressions of growing curiosity. The hegemony's finest military minds were apparently developing a collective interest in watching the human volunteer for torture. The answer is no, Cadet Morrison. We will observe the device's effects on the standard neural simulation dummy and proceed with theoretical analysis. Could I at least try 5%, just to establish a baseline? The persistence was remarkable. Vexka had to admit a grudging respect for the human's dedication to education, even if that dedication appeared rooted in some form of species-wide mental deficiency. Crixval spoke again, her voice carrying the musical tones that made Tefren's speech so pleasant and their political demands so hard to refuse. Perhaps a compromise, instructor? A brief exposure at minimal settings might provide valuable comparative data. 5%, 30 seconds maximum, added Zetmo, a Vorlak engineering student whose opinion on pain tolerance carried considerable weight, given that his species reproduced by ritually disemboweling each other. Vexka found himself surrounded by eager faces, all apparently convinced that watching Morrison experience technological torture constituted quality educational content. The human himself maintained an expression of polite interest, as if they were discussing lunch plans rather than neurological assault. 1%, Vexka finally conceded. 5 seconds, and Morrison signs a waiver absolving the Academy of responsibility when he requires extended psychological rehabilitation. Deal. Morrison stood and approached the device with the casual confidence of someone accepting a dinner invitation. Do I need to remove any clothing, or does the neural interface work through fabric? Direct skin contact with the crown is required. Vexka activated the device's preliminary systems, muttering under his breath in Old Tarathi. The translation would have been highly inappropriate for a military classroom. Morrison settled into the restraint chair, a piece of furniture that looked disturbingly like a throne, designed by sadistic architects. The neural crown descended with mechanical precision, its fiber optic conduits settling against his temples with soft, clicking sounds. 1% activation in 3, 2, 1. The human's face went through a series of interesting expressions as the nerve storm engaged his nervous system. His jaw tightened, his breathing shifted to shallow pants, and his knuckles went white against the armrests. But he didn't scream. He didn't beg. He didn't even seem particularly distressed. After 5 seconds, Vexka deactivated the device. Fascinating, Morrison said, flexing his fingers experimentally. The pain feels completely real, but there's this weird artificial quality to it. Like your brain knows something's wrong with the signal. Could we try 10%? The classroom had gone dead silent. Even the ventilation system seemed to be holding its breath. What? Vexka's voice cracked slightly. 10%. I think I'm getting used to the sensation. This was impossible. 1% of the nerve storm's output had hospitalized trained interrogators. The human was treating it like a mild headache. Morrison, do you understand what just happened? You experienced synthesized agony that has broken the minds of seasoned warriors. Yes, sir. It was unpleasant. Could we increase the intensity? Crixval leaned toward her neighbor, a hegemony citizen whose species specialized in psychological warfare. Is this normal human behavior? I have no idea, came the whispered reply. I thought they were supposed to be soft. Vexka stared at Morrison with growing horror. The human appeared completely unaffected by an experience that should have left him catatonic. Either he was the greatest actor in galactic history, or humans were far more dangerous than anyone realized. 15%, Morrison suggested helpfully. That's your standard demonstration setting, right? Admiral Thek Nor's third stomach was producing acid at an alarming rate, which usually meant one of two things. Either he'd consumed spoiled fermented grax again, or someone had delivered catastrophically bad news. Given that his aide was hovering near the office entrance with the expression of a condemned prisoner, he suspected the latter. Let me guess, Thek Nor said, without looking up from his morning briefings. The humans have done something impossible, again. Sir, we have a situation at the Academy. The Admiral's tentacles stopped sorting through reports. In his 43 years of military service, he'd learned that any sentence beginning with, "We have a situation," was invariably followed by expensive property damage, diplomatic incidents, or both. Which human this time? Please tell me it's not the one who redesigned our fighter controls because they were inefficient. Different human, sir. This one volunteered for a nerve storm demonstration. Thek Nor's primary eyes focused on his aide with the intensity of orbital weapon systems locking onto a target. Volunteered for what now? Instructor Vexka was conducting standard advanced psychological warfare curriculum. Cadet Morrison requested to experience the device personally. And Vexka presumably explained that such an experience would reduce the cadet to a gibbering wreck? Yes, sir. The human asked if he could try twice. The Admiral's tentacles went completely still, a physiological response his species exhibited when confronting information that defied basic reality. He'd seen the same reaction in other officers when learning that humans considered atmospheric re-entry a recreational activity. Continue. Morrison endured 2 full minutes at maximum intensity. When the session concluded, he inquired about advanced settings. Thek Nor closed his eyes and began the deep breathing exercises his therapist had recommended for managing stress-induced organ failure. They weren't working. Get me Commander Yilk's Wrath from Strategic Intelligence, now. Within minutes, the office door dissolved to admit a Valdorian whose usual composure had been replaced by something resembling poorly controlled panic. Yilk's Wrath's chromatophores were shifting through colors that didn't exist in his species' normal emotional spectrum. Admiral, I assume you've heard about our educational mishap? I've heard pieces. Fill in the gaps before my cardiovascular system stages a revolt. Yilk's Wrath activated his personal display projector, filling the office with holographic data streams that looked distinctly ominous. The Morrison incident has created ripple effects throughout our intelligence networks. 12 sector commanders have requested immediate briefings on human pain tolerance. The Tarathi Embassy wants to know if we're harboring a new warrior caste, and the Collective Council is demanding explanations for why we've been classifying humans as militarily insignificant. Because they told us they were peaceful explorers interested in cultural exchange, Thek Nor replied through clenched teeth. Their first contact protocols emphasized scientific cooperation and philosophical dialogue. Yes, well, apparently their definition of philosophical dialogue includes treating our most feared interrogation tool as light entertainment. The Admiral's aide cleared his throat nervously. Sir, there's more. The incident was recorded for educational purposes. The footage is currently circulating through Academy channels. Tell me the recording doesn't show Morrison enjoying himself. I cannot tell you that, sir. Thek Nor felt his third stomach produce another wave of acid. Show me, The holographic display shifted to Academy security footage. Morrison sat calmly in the restraint chair while the neural crown activated, his face cycling through expressions that suggested mild discomfort rather than existential agony. After 2 minutes, an eternity by galactic standards, the device powered down. "Instructor, is there a level above maximum?" Morrison asked conversationally. "I think I'm building tolerance." The footage ended with Vex-Ka staring at his equipment in apparent disbelief, while cadets from various species watched with expressions ranging from awe to religious terror. "This is a disaster," Yilk's-Wrath muttered, his chromatophores now cycling through colors that definitely weren't in any standard reference manual. "Do you understand the implications? Our entire military doctrine assumes that extreme pain equals immediate compliance. We've based centuries of strategy on the universal principle that no rational being would endure unnecessary suffering. And now we've discovered a species that finds unnecessary suffering. What? Relaxing? Educational, according to the transcript." Theknor's tentacles began massaging his temples in slow, deliberate circles. "What does strategic analysis say about this?" "They're requesting additional data points. Apparently, one human doesn't constitute a statistically significant sample." "Absolutely not. We are not torturing more exchange students for the sake of scientific curiosity." "Sir," the aide interrupted hesitantly, "Morrison has volunteered to participate in additional experiments. He seems genuinely interested in helping us understand the limitations of our psychological warfare systems." The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as concentrated dread. Theknor stared at the frozen hologram of Morrison's perfectly calm face and felt something very much like existential fear creep up his spine. "Get me Director Zith Lam from Xenobiology," he finally said. "If humans are this resilient to artificial pain stimulation, I need to know what else we've been wrong about." Yilk's-Wrath's display updated with incoming priority messages. "Sir, we're receiving requests from 17 department heads for emergency briefings on human capabilities. Engineering wants to know if they need to redesign safety protocols. Medical is asking about human injury thresholds, and Academy Command is requesting immediate curriculum reviews." "What kind of curriculum reviews?" "They want to know which other demonstrations might prove inadequate for human participants." The Admiral's aide produced a datapad with trembling appendages. "Sir, there's a list. Morrison has volunteered for atmospheric decompression simulation, gravitational stress, testing, and something called enhanced sensory deprivation with psychological pressure elements." "He volunteered for all of those?" "He said it sounded comprehensive." Theknor experienced the unique sensation of his worldview cracking around the edges. For decades, the hegemony had operated under the assumption that humans were typical carbon-based life forms with standard biological limitations. They'd designed their military academies, their diplomatic protocols, and their strategic assessments based on that premise. Now it appeared they'd been systematically underestimating a species that treated galactic standard torture as undergraduate coursework. "Yilk's-Wrath, I need you to compile everything we know about human evolutionary history. I want to understand how a species develops this kind of resilience." "Already in progress, sir." Preliminary findings suggest their homeworld might have been significantly more hostile than our initial surveys indicated. Define significantly more hostile. "Death world classification, sir, possibly Category 7. The Admiral's tentacles went rigid with shock. Category 7 death worlds were considered uninhabitable by galactic standards. The few expeditions to such environments had ended in complete mission failure due to environmental hazards that defied conventional survival equipment." "You're telling me humans evolved on a planet so dangerous we wouldn't send prisoners there?" "It would explain their apparent indifference to controlled suffering, sir." If their ancestors survived by adapting to constant environmental threats, standard pain responses might have been selected out of their species. Theknor closed his eyes and tried to imagine the implications. A species that had evolved beyond normal pain responses wouldn't just be resistant to interrogation. They'd be unpredictable in every military context the hegemony had ever considered. How many humans are currently attending our military academies? 47 exchange students across 12 facilities, sir. And how many of them have volunteered for additional educational experiences? His aide consulted the datapad again. All of them, sir. Dr. Zith Lam had spent the better part of her career studying the peculiarities of carbon-based life forms, but she'd never encountered a research subject that made her question the fundamental laws of evolutionary biology. Her laboratory hummed with the quiet desperation of scientists discovering that everything they thought they knew was catastrophically wrong. Pull up the neural mapping data from yesterday's session, she instructed her research assistant, a young Karathi whose enthusiasm for xenobiology was being rapidly tempered by existential dread. The holographic display materialized above her workstation, showing Morrison's brain activity during his encounter with progressively intensified neural stimulation. Where other species showed the expected patterns of distress, panic, and eventual psychological collapse, the human's readings resembled someone solving a mildly challenging puzzle. "This cannot be accurate," muttered Dr. Velkorin, her chief neurological consultant. "Look at the endorphin production levels. They're completely inverted. Instead of pain response, he's generating what appears to be satisfaction. Run the comparison analysis with the Krillian battlemonk data." The display split to show both neural patterns side by side. The Krillian's readings spiked into dangerous territory within seconds, showing the classic markers of a nervous system under siege. Morrison's brain, by contrast, seemed to be treating the experience as a learning opportunity. "Doctor," her assistant spoke up nervously, "the biochemical analysis from his post-session samples is ready." "And?" "His cortisol levels actually decreased during the procedure. His dopamine markers suggest he found the experience engaging." Dr. Zith Lam stared at the data with the expression of someone watching physics spontaneously decide to take a holiday. Engaging. He found systematic neural torture engaging. "More specifically, Doctor," Velkorin added unhelpfully, "he appears to have derived intellectual stimulation from analyzing the pain synthesis process while experiencing it." The implications were staggering. Every torture device, every psychological pressure technique, every form of enhanced interrogation the hegemony had developed was predicated on the assumption that conscious beings would do anything to avoid suffering. The humans seemed to have evolved past that basic survival mechanism entirely. "Show me the evolutionary timeline analysis," Zith Lam commanded. The holographic display shifted to a three-dimensional model of human development across geological ages. What she saw made her wish she'd chosen a safer career, like explosive demolition or toxic waste management. Sol 3 environmental data indicates surface temperatures ranging from -40 to +60 degrees Celsius, her assistant reported, with the tone of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. Regular seismic activity, atmospheric electrical storms, predatory megafauna, and toxic plant life covering approximately 70% of land masses. "That's not a habitable world, Doctor," Velkorin observed. "That's a military testing facility designed by lunatics." The timeline continued, showing human ancestors developing increasingly sophisticated adaptations to their nightmare environment. Enhanced pain tolerance wasn't an anomaly. It was a prerequisite for survival. Any human ancestor who couldn't ignore serious injury long enough to escape immediate threats had been removed from the gene pool with ruthless efficiency. "Look at this," Zithlam highlighted a section of the evolutionary data. Their precursor species developed the ability to suppress pain response during crisis situations. But humans took it further. They learned to process pain as information rather than emergency signals. Which means they don't just tolerate suffering, they analyze it. Pain became a diagnostic tool for their species rather than a deterrent. Dr. Velkorin's head crest flattened against his skull in a gesture of profound unease. Doctor, are you suggesting that humans evolved to find pain useful? I'm suggesting that humans evolved on a world so consistently hostile that normal pain responses would have been counterproductive. Their ancestors needed to think clearly while injured, function normally while under physical stress, and make rational decisions while experiencing trauma that would incapacitate other species. The research team fell silent, absorbing the magnitude of what they'd discovered. The hegemony's military planners had been operating under the assumption that humans were standard biological entities with typical physiological limitations. Instead, they'd been dealing with the products of millions of years of evolutionary pressure testing. There's more, her assistant announced, loading additional data files. Morrison's post-session interviews reveal concerning details about human cultural attitudes toward adversity. Concerning how? He described the nerve storm experience as character building and asked if we had similar devices for psychological resilience training. Zithlam felt her research objectivity crumbling like a poorly constructed scientific hypothesis. He wants to use our torture devices for self-improvement? Apparently, humans have cultural concepts like no pain, no gain, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. They seem to view suffering as a form of personal development. The doctor's secondary nervous system began generating stress hormones at levels that would have been considered dangerous in any other species. She was starting to understand why the military leadership had requested emergency consultations. Pull up the comparative pain threshold data for all known sentient species. The display updated to show a comprehensive chart of physiological limits across the galaxy's major civilizations. Humans didn't just exceed the established parameters, they weren't even on the same scale. According to these measurements, Dr. Velkorin observed with academic detachment, humans shouldn't exist. Their pain tolerance levels are literally off our charts. Because our charts were designed for rational beings, Zithlam replied. We never accounted for a species that evolved to treat agony as educational content. A priority communication alert interrupted her growing sense of cosmic dread. Admiral Thek Nor's image materialized in the lab, his expression suggesting someone who'd been receiving too much information of the wrong sort. Doctor, I need immediate answers. How many more surprises should we expect from human physiology? Admiral, based on our preliminary analysis, we may have underestimated human capabilities across multiple categories. If their pain tolerance is this far beyond galactic norms, we need to reconsider our assumptions about their physical limitations, psychological resilience, and survival instincts. Are you telling me that every human exchange student represents a potential intelligence failure? I'm telling you that human exchange students might be inadvertently conducting stress testing on our most classified military systems, and based on early results, our systems are failing. The Admiral's tentacles performed what could charitably be described as an anxiety dance. What's your recommendation, Doctor? We need comprehensive testing protocols to establish actual human limitations before they volunteer for anything else. Morrison has already requested access to our gravitational conditioning chambers, sensory deprivation modules, and something he called the Advanced Program. There is no advanced program. He suggested we create one. The communication channel went silent for several seconds before Thek Nor responded with the weary tone of someone accepting inevitable defeat. Doctor, I'm authorizing unlimited research resources for your investigation. Find out what humans are actually capable of before they discover it themselves." As the connection terminated, Dr. Zith Lam turned to her research team with the expression of someone who'd just been tasked with measuring infinity using standard laboratory equipment. "Gentlemen, we're about to rewrite xenobiology textbooks. I suggest we start with a new chapter titled, 'When Evolution Goes Horribly Right.'" The Emergency Curriculum Review Committee had been in session for 18 hours, fueled by synthetic caffeine and the growing realization that their entire educational philosophy needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. Dean Korthvel presided over the chaos with the resigned dignity of someone watching their life's work become academically obsolete. "Status report on the Morrison protocols," she announced to the assembled department heads, each of whom looked like they'd been personally insulted by the laws of physics. Professor Keth Marn, from Advanced Survival Studies, cleared his throat nervously. "The human has completed atmospheric decompression testing, high-gravity endurance trials, and psychological isolation chambers. His performance in each case has been unprecedented." Define unprecedented. "He fell asleep during the isolation chamber exercise. When we retrieved him after 6 days, he said it was peaceful and asked if we offered longer sessions." Dean Korthvel felt her educational philosophy crumbling like ancient architecture. "And the decompression testing?" "He remained conscious during full vacuum exposure longer than our emergency protocols account for. The medical team had to override the safety systems because he wasn't exhibiting expected physiological distress." Dr. Hext Lim from military psychology raised a trembling appendage. "Dean, we have a more immediate problem. Morrison's performance has inspired the other human exchange students. They're requesting enrollment in what they call the full program." "What full program?" "They want to experience every training scenario we offer, from basic discomfort conditioning to advanced psychological pressure techniques. They've submitted a petition requesting access to classified military endurance protocols." The dean's cranial ridges shifted to a position indicating profound mental distress. "They're treating our military academy like a recreational facility?" "Worse," Professor Keth Marn replied. "They're providing feedback on how to improve our training methods." Morrison submitted a 12-page analysis of our psychological warfare curriculum with suggestions for enhanced realism. He wants our torture devices to be more realistic. He wants them to be more challenging. The committee sat in stunned silence, contemplating the implications of students who found their most extreme training exercises insufficiently extreme. These were military techniques developed over centuries to prepare elite forces for the worst possible scenarios. Humans were requesting upgrades. Captain Irex Tam from Advanced Combat Studies activated his personal display unit. "The situation has evolved beyond individual incidents. Human exchange students across all 12 academy facilities are demonstrating similar capabilities. Yesterday, a human cadet at the Rigel installation completed our entire pain tolerance certification program in a single afternoon." "The program designed to take 6 months?" "She said she had a free weekend." Dean Korthvel closed her eyes and tried to remember when her career had taken this particular turn toward madness. "What are our options?" "We could redesign the curriculum to accommodate human capabilities," suggested Dr. Hext Lim. "Create advanced protocols specifically for their enhanced tolerance levels." "With what equipment?" "Our most sophisticated training devices are already operating at maximum intensity." Professor Keth Marn consulted his research notes. "The engineering department has some unconventional suggestions. They propose developing new training systems based on human environmental history, simulated death world scenarios, enhanced survival challenges, that sort of thing." "You want to recreate the conditions that made humans this resilient in the first place?" The humans are requesting it specifically. They claim our current programs lack authentic challenge. The dean felt her species' equivalent of a migraine beginning to develop behind her optical sensors. And the other species? How are non-human cadets responding to these developments? Captain Irex Tam's display updated with concerning data. Morale issues among traditional students. Many are requesting transfers to institutions without human exchange programs. They find the comparison demoralizing. They're being outperformed by beings they assumed were primitive. More specifically, they're being outperformed by beings who treat our most difficult challenges as casual entertainment. The committee exchanged glances that conveyed volumes about the fundamental reassessment of galactic hierarchy currently underway. For centuries, military academies had operated on the principle that advanced civilizations produced superior warriors through sophisticated training methods. Humans had arrived and casually demonstrated that sometimes evolution was a more effective teacher than institutional education. Recommendations? The dean asked wearily. Complete curriculum overhaul, Doctor. Hextlim replied immediately. We need separate training tracks, standard protocols for conventional species, and enhanced programs for humans. The alternative is watching our traditional students develop severe confidence issues. And what do we do about the humans' requests for increasingly difficult challenges? Professor Kethmarn cleared his throat. Actually, Dean, Morrison has proposed a solution. He suggests humans could serve as test subjects for experimental training protocols. Help us develop more effective preparation methods for extreme scenarios. The dean stared at him with an expression of someone discovering that reality had developed a sense of humor. The human wants to help us design better torture? He prefers the term enhanced educational experiences. Of course he does. A priority communication alert interrupted the meeting. Admiral Thek-Nor's image appeared with the harried expression of someone managing a crisis that defied conventional solutions. Dean, I need immediate implementation of the Morrison protocols across all Academy facilities. Sir, we haven't finished developing the protocols yet. Then finish faster. 3 more human exchange students have volunteered for classified endurance testing. Our current systems are completely inadequate for their capabilities, and they're starting to notice. Notice what, sir? That our military training standards are designed for species significantly less durable than they are. If humans realize how much we've been underestimating them, our entire strategic balance shifts. The dean felt the universe's sense of irony settling around her like a comfortable but thoroughly inappropriate blanket. The hegemony's military academies, designed to produce the galaxy's finest warriors, had been inadvertently conducting kindergarten classes for a species that treated advanced torture as remedial education. Dean, Morrison's voice came over the facility intercom. Could someone from the curriculum committee meet with us? We have some suggestions for next semester's program improvements. Through the conference room's transparent aluminum windows, they could see Morrison and 6 other human exchange students gathered in the courtyard, discussing something with the animated enthusiasm of people planning a particularly exciting vacation. What are they planning now? Captain Irex Tam asked with the tone of someone who really didn't want to know the answer. According to their submitted proposals, the dean replied, consulting her datapad. They want to design training scenarios based on authentic military challenges from human historical conflicts. The committee sat in horrified silence as the implications sank in. If humans considered galactic standard torture insufficiently challenging, their own historical military experiences represented an entirely different category of nightmare. Professor Kethmarn spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. What kind of military challenges are we talking about? The dean scrolled through Morrison's submitted materials. something called trench warfare simulation, extended siege endurance training, and psychological warfare resistance based on historical interrogation methods. Historical human interrogation methods? Apparently, humans have been systematically torturing each other for educational purposes throughout their recorded history. They call it military training. Outside in the courtyard, Morrison was gesturing enthusiastically while explaining something to his fellow humans. Whatever he was describing had them nodding with expressions of eager anticipation. Captain Irex Tam updated the Academy's official motto display from "Pain is universal" to "Results may vary," then added a subtitle in smaller text. Management not responsible for existential crises. The dean looked around the table at her colleagues, each of whom was grappling with the realization that their understanding of military education had been fundamentally challenged by a species that treated suffering as a learning opportunity. "Gentlemen," she announced with the weary acceptance of someone whose worldview had been thoroughly demolished, "I believe we're going to need a bigger curriculum."